Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a subject that, well, a lot of people might think sounds like a thriller plot, maybe even, a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But it's about the systematic, documented link between the U.S. government and Hollywood.
Yeah, the idea itself isn't totally new, that Washington and Hollywood are connected,
No, not at all.
but the actual scale of it, the documented scale, that's what's really surprising here based on the research.
And this isn't just speculation anymore, is it? We're talking about solid evidence.
Absolutely not speculation. The research we're drawing on comes mainly from Dr. Matthew Alford and Tom Secker. They really dug deep using the Freedom of Information Act.
FOIA. That's the key then. Getting the actual government documents.
Exactly. FOIA requests forced U.S. agencies to release these non-classified documents. And what they found, well, it really pulls back the curtain on decades of strategic narrative control.
And these documents show it's not just like a casual chat here and there between a director and someone at the Pentagon.
No. It's much bigger. It's a structured system, really.
Yeah.
A mechanism of influence. And it's been operating pretty consistently for a long time.
So quantitatively, just how big are we talking? What did the numbers show?
Well, the official figures and the researchers say these are probably conservative estimates.
Okay.
They're staggering. Just between 1911 and 2017, the Department of Defense, the DoD, gave documented support to 814 films
800 films.
and 11,133 television titles. So you add that up. It's 1,947 screen entertainment products officially supported by the DoD.
Wow. Almost 2,000 titles.
Yeah.
And that's just the DoD. And just like the main film or series title, not every single episode.
That's correct. Just the DoD's official documented involvement in films and overall series. It doesn't count, the hundreds of episodes for long-running shows.
Right, like NCIS or 24 or something.
Exactly. Shows like 24, Homeland, the NCIS franchise. You add in all those individual episodes, and then you start factoring in other big players, the CIA, the FBI, even the White House.
Okay, so it balloons.
The total number of entertainment products shaped by the national security state, it climbs into the thousands. Easily. This isn't accidental. It's really an industry-wide thing.
So the goal for us in this deep dive then is to walk you, the listener, through this documentation. We need to get beyond just if they're involved and look at how they shaped the stories. We're talking specific script changes they demand
Right.
in exchange for access.
Precisely. What changes do they mandate to get that cooperation, that access to equipment or locations? And maybe just as importantly, what happens when filmmakers actually try to push back, when they resist?
Because that takes guts, presumably, given the power involved.
It takes guts, and it often doesn't end well for the project.
Okay, so let's start with the Department of Defense, the DoD, because, they seem to be the biggest player here, the most visible one in Hollywood.
Undeniably, yeah.
What's their main marketing chip? What gives the Pentagon so much leverage over these huge multi-million-dollar movies?
It really boils down to cost and access, basically impossibility. The DoD owns all this high-value military gear vehicles, aircraft, ships, bases, stuff filmmakers just can't replicate.
Or rent easily, I imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can't rent it. They certainly can't afford to build it. We're talking billions of dollars worth of assets. Helicopters, warships, F-22 fighter jets, trained personnel in uniform.
And they offer this for?
For peanuts, relatively speaking. Maybe a few $100,000 in fees. So if you're a studio exec, trying to keep a budget down, and the director wants that realism,
It's a no-brainer.
it's a massive financial incentive. Almost impossible to turn down.
So you get the cool military toys for cheap, but you have to play by their rules.
That's the deal.
And the Transformers movies seem like the poster child for this whole arrangement.
Oh, absolutely. The first Transformers back in 2007, you got a record amount of military help. Something like 12 different types of Air Force planes, troops from 4 different bases.
Oh.
For the second film, the production team's wish list was like over 50 specific pieces of military hardware. And think about the cost they got access to things like the F-22 Raptor.
Which had never been filmed before, right?
Never appeared on screen before. And those things are valued at, what, $150 million each?
So the studio gets access to potentially billions in assets for a tiny fraction of the cost. And for the Pentagon.
It's a huge win, a massive return on investment. They basically get a high-octane global recruitment ad.
Yeah, an action-packed commercial.
That's what it is. Producer Ian Bryce actually called that DoD investment force multiplied. But it's not just the logistics that are interesting, it's the message underneath.
What message is that?
Well, the researchers point out, okay, people say Transformers is just fun escapism, right? But look at the politics. When the sequels go global, who helps the Autobots fight the Decepticons?
The U.S. military.
The American military. And maybe the British, a little bit. That's it. It sends this implicit message, what some have called war pornography. It thrills you, but it also quietly promotes total faith in the Pentagon as the only entity capable of handling global threats.
Okay, so that's the implicit side, but then there's the explicit control. The actual censorship, the script changes. This is where the cost of those free toys really comes in.
Exactly. The military isn't just lending stuff. They're reading scripts, they're giving notes, and those notes, they're essentially mandatory if you want to keep that equipment coming.
How does that work procedurally?
It's formalized through their Entertainment Liaison Office, the ELO. They're the gatekeepers for all military assets. And one of the clearest examples of these mandated changes is the film Rules of Engagement.
The one with Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson? From 2000.
That's the one. The DoD demanded really specific changes that systematically made the military look good, often by making the civilian government characters look, well, incompetent.
And these weren't just vague suggestions. They got specific.
Oh, incredibly specific. Right down to character motivation. For instance, the ELO wanted the filmmakers to make the ambassador character, Moraine, seem like a real wet noodle.
A wet noodle? Why?
To make the military characters look decisive and superior in comparison to the civilian leadership. They also demanded they cut a whole scene.
What scene was that?
A scene where the main character, Colonel Childers, appears as, and this is the quote, a bona fide nutcase during a psych evaluation before his court-martial.
So a scene showing the psychological toll.
Yes, a scene that would have added real depth, shown the mental strain he was under, cut, gone from the final movie. They wanted to sanitize that aspect.
So they clean up the image, remove the messy psychological stuff?
And they even sanitized the language. There was dialogue, dirty job, talking about the mission. The ELO objected.
Why? Dirty job seems realistic.
They felt it implied the mission itself was inherently bad, morally wrong. So it got changed to tough mission, much more neutral, sanitized. It guides the audience away from questioning the mission's morality.
But the most critical change in Rules of Engagement, the one that really swings the justification for the Marines firing on that crowd, it all comes down to that CCTV footage, right?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The whole moral question of the film, were the Marines justified, gets completely resolved, you could say erased, by this suddenly discovered CCTV tape.
Which conveniently shows.
It conveniently shows that everyone in the crowd outside the embassy wasn't just aggressive, but heavily armed, and that the first shots came from the crowd.
And there's that specific manipulative detail the researchers noted involving a child.
Exactly. This is quite chilling. The script specifically includes a little Yemeni girl, an amputee. Initially, she's presented as this symbol of innocent victimhood,
making you question the Marines' actions.
right? But then, the CCTV footage, which the DoD essentially insisted on, shows this same little girl angrily firing a pistol up at the Marines.
Wow.
So that single detail implicates everyone, men, women, even this child, in being hostile combatants. It completely justifies the Marines' response. The DoD basically wrote the film's legal defense into the plot.
That's actively rewriting the narrative for PR. And this strategy, the sanitization, it applies to historical conflicts too, like Vietnam.
Yeah, we see clear examples there. There was an attempted film called Fields of Fire, and also John Wayne's The Green Berets. With Fields of Fire, the DoD objected to anything negative about Marines.
Like what specifically?
Scenes showing fragging soldiers killing their own officers. That had to go. Also a scene where a Marine posed for a picture next to a POW burned by napalm. Removed.
So controlling the historical memory, ensuring the conduct looks clean, even if reality was messier.
Definitely. And in The Green Berets, which was based partly on real accounts that included torture, the DoD wouldn't support it unless the violence was toned down. So in the film, John Wayne's character steps in, stops anything more than a slap. The actual torture happens off screen, if at all.
The message being, Americans don't do that.
Americans don't torture. That's the takeaway they wanted.
Okay, this leads to what the research calls the authenticity lie. Hollywood and the Pentagon say this is all about accuracy, right? Technical realism.
That's the public line, yeah. Authenticity.
So what happens when the real story, the authentic account, doesn't fit the Pentagon's PR goals?
Then authenticity goes out the window. Lone Survivor is the key example here. From 2013,
Okay.
it was heavily promoted as this totally faithful, authentic account of a real battle based on the book by the sole survivor, Marcus Luttrell. But the Pentagon knew that even Luttrell's account, specifically the number of Taliban fighters they faced, didn't quite serve their purpose. So they supported altering a critical detail.
And that detail was the number of enemy fighters, inflating the odds.
Exactly. This is really important. Independent reporting like Ed Derrick's book citing military intel put the number of Taliban fighters at maybe 8 to 10.
8 to 10.
The official medal citation bumped that up to 50. Luttrell's own book, which the film is based on, inflated it even more, up to 200.
And the film?
The film script settles on reporting at least 50 fighters.
Yeah.
The point wasn't historical accuracy. It was about maximizing the heroism, maximizing the threat the SEALs overcame.
So the claim of authenticity is really just a cover for crafting a specific public image.
Completely. The Internal Army ELO reports basically admitted it. They saw the film as, and this is a quote, audiences voluntarily sitting through a 2-hour infomercial for Army Special Forces.
An infomercial?
Yeah. The goal was recruitment, public image, getting the audience emotionally invested in these special ops guys. Authenticity was secondary.
So what happens when a film seems like it might be critical? Like, say, Contact or Avatar. They had anti-establishment vibes, didn't they? How does the DoD handle scripts that seem critical on the surface?
Yeah, that's interesting. They use tactics like civilianization or subtle language shifts. Take Contact, the Jodie Foster film from '97.
Right. About receiving an alien signal.
The producers wanted DoD help, vehicles, helicopters for National Guard sequence. But the original script apparently had a much larger and not entirely positive role for the military.
And the ELO records show the negotiation.
They do. The Pentagon's own database notes say negotiated civilianization of almost all military parts. They pushed to minimize the military role, remove anything silly or negative.
So they sideline the military part of the story.
Exactly. Turn it into just a benign background element. Make it positive, or at least neutral. Allow them to use the helicopters, but script out the critical substance.
Turn a potential problem into just set dressing.
Perfect way to put it. And you see something similar, though maybe more subtle, in James Cameron's Avatar.
Which was widely seen as anti-war, anti-imperialist.
Definitely. The Marines on Pandora are clearly the bad guys, right? Hired guns for a greedy corporation.
Yeah.
Yet, the Marine Corps ELO still gave them courtesy support for verbiage in the script dialogue. They met with Cameron multiple times. And notice the language. The main character, Jake, he specifically says that while the Marines on Pandora are bad.
There's a distinction.
Yes. Back on Earth, he says, Marines are fighting for freedom. That little line acts like a firewall. It protects the institution, the real U.S. Marine Corps, even while its fictional counterparts are villains.
Okay, so let's shift from the DoD's tanks and jets to the Shadows, the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. Their influence feels different, right? Less about hardware, more about information, narrative.
That's a good way to put it. The CIA's influence is definitely smaller in terms of volume. They don't have aircraft carriers to lend out.
Right.
But strategically and maybe systematically, it's actually larger than most people think, especially when you look at their history, their roots in psychological warfare, even aimed at Americans.
And this goes way back, before the CIA was even officially formed in '47.
Oh, yeah, you have to go back to World War II, to the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, the CIA's predecessor.
Okay.
The OSS actually had an official film unit, about 300 people from Hollywood directors, technicians. And there's this incredible OSS memo from 1943.
What did it say?
It was titled, The Motion Picture as a Weapon of Psychological Warfare. And it literally described using the entire movie industry as a weapon, not just against foreign enemies, but explicitly targeting the domestic population to civilians and military.
Wow. An open blueprint for psych warfare on the home front during wartime.
Pretty much. And the absolute classic example of this early sort of covert script manipulation before they even had an ELO is the first film version of The Quiet American.
Graham Greene's novel,
Right.
which was very critical of early U.S. involvement in Vietnam.
Highly critical. So how did the CIA influence the 1958 film adaptation?
Wow.
A real CIA operations officer, Edward Lansdale, got directly involved in rewriting the script.
Yeah.
In Greene's book, the American protagonist, Pyle, is killed because he's caught making plastic explosives for terrorist attacks. He's the bad guy.
Okay.
In the movie, thanks to Lansdale's input, the explosives were changed to plastic toys.
Toys, seriously.
Plastic toys intended for Vietnamese kids. It completely flips the story.
So the American isn't the terrorist manufacturer.
He's a well-meaning humanitarian, brutally murdered by the communists for trying to do good. It's a total reversal of the book's anti-interventionist message, Pure Cold War propaganda done quietly behind the scenes.
And then much later, in 1996, they made this formal, set up their own entertainment liaison office like the DoD.
They did. And the official goal sounds, reasonable enough.
Mm-hmm.
Ensure an accurate portrayal of the men and women of the CIA, debunk myths, that sort of thing.
But the reality is about gaining influence through access.
Absolutely. They get cooperation by opening doors. It's actually kind of amazing how many big Hollywood names have visited CIA headquarters at Langley or worked directly with the agency for research.
Like who?
Oh, Robert De Niro, Tom Cruise, Claire Danes from Homeland, Mike Myers, George Clooney, and big writer-producers too, like J.J. Abrams. They get access the public could only dream of.
In exchange for?
Cooperation, listening to their perspective, refining the narrative.
Now, one of the really weird aspects of this is what the researchers call predictive storytelling, where real, maybe even classified operational ideas seem to pop up in fiction first.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The TV show The Unit from 2006 is a prime example.
What happened there?
The screenwriter, a guy named Beckner, he got the idea for an episode plot arming a Predator drone with a missile to kill a rogue Pakistani general directly from the CIA liaison, Chase Brandon. This wasn't public knowledge back then. And then, just weeks after that episode aired, it happened in real life. A Predator drone with a Hellfire missile killed a rogue Pakistani general.
Whoa, that's more than just coincidence.
Beckner himself called it a unique synergy. It really suggests the agency might be using entertainment to sort of float ideas, maybe prepare the public for future policies or operations.
That kind of soft psychological prep.
Could be. And sometimes the liaison officer himself seems to become part of the fiction, blurring the lines even further. Well, there's a really strong suspicion that the same CIA liaison, Chase Brandon, was the direct inspiration for the character Conrad Breen in the movie Wag the Dog.
Robert De Niro's character, the spin doctor.
Exactly. The name sounds similar, Brandon, Breen. And apparently De Niro even modeled his look and voice on Chase Brandon after meeting him.
But Wag the Dog is supposed to be a satire, right? Making fun of how political reality is manufactured.
That's the irony. It is meant as satire. Breen is hired to fake a war to cover up a presidential scandal. Total cynicism.
So how does it end up promoting the system it's mocking?
Because of a key speech Breen gives?
Yeah.
Someone asks why we need spy satellites if there's no big enemy like the Soviets anymore. And Breen flips it. He says, if there's no threat, what good are you? Then he invents the new threat, nuclear terrorism by small dissident groups. He basically creates the justification for the whole intelligence apparatus to continue, even without a Cold War.
He manufactures the need for the security state.
Precisely. He argues the public has to stay alert, be prepared for this new kind of war. So, if you're watching that Inside the CIA, Brienne isn't the villain exposing the system. He's the hero who justifies its continued existence and funding by creating the next existential threat. The satire accidentally becomes pro-intelligence propaganda.
Okay, so DoD handles the military image.
Yes.
CIA handles the intelligence narrative. What about the FBI? Their historical role seems different again, more focused inward, on domestic issues, ideology.
That's exactly the distinction. The FBI, especially under J. Edgar Hoover for all those decades, was heavily involved in policing ideology within the entertainment industry. They used celebrities as informants.
Informants? Really? Like who?
Well, the most maybe shocking example is Walt Disney.
Walt Disney. The creator of Mickey Mouse was an FBI informant.
He had a very close relationship with the FBI's LA office from 1940 right up until he died in '66. By the mid-50s, he was actually promoted to Special Agent in Charge Contact.
What does that mean?
It means he had a direct line to the bureau chief in L.A. And the documents show he was essentially running his own network of informants inside Hollywood.
Reporting on.
Suspected communists, people he considered undesirables. He'd pass information to the FBI. He also testified voluntarily before the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, helping the anti-communist investigations in Hollywood.
That's genuinely disturbing. A beloved icon acting as an informant against colleagues.
It is. And this obsession with left-wing politics, real or perceived, led to some really aggressive actions. The destruction of Charlie Chaplin's career is a prime example.
Chaplin? What did the FBI have against him?
Hoover was obsessed with him. Chaplin had left-leaning views. He supported helping the Soviet Union during World War II. That was enough. The FBI built up a massive file on him, like 2,000 pages.
1,000 pages?
Yeah, digging into his politics, his personal life, even asking British intelligence for dirt. They were determined to find a reason to deport him.
And they eventually succeeded, effectively exiled him.
They did. In 1952, Chaplin went on a trip to Europe. While he was gone, the U.S. Attorney General, after consulting directly with Hoover, canceled his reentry permit, banned him from coming back.
On what grounds?
Officially, because he was supposedly a communist sympathizer. But the FBI's own files admitted they didn't really have solid legal evidence. The political climate, though, the Red Scare, Chaplin decided not to fight it. He lives the rest of his life in Switzerland.
So the FBI just quietly destroyed the U.S. career of arguably the greatest comedian ever, purely for political reasons.
That's what the documents suggest. Systematically ended his career here.
And they didn't just target individuals, right? They went after entire films they thought were subversive.
Oh, absolutely. They moved beyond just investigating people to actively suppressing works of art. The best example the researchers found is a film called Salt of the Earth.
Salt of the Earth, 1954. What was it about?
It was a drama about a mining strike in New Mexico, focusing on Mexican-American workers' rights. Very pro-labor, definitely critical of corporate power.
So politically inconvenient for the time.
Extremely. And the FBI and its allies launched an all-out campaign to crush it. It shows the full power of this internal propaganda engine when it targets something specific.
What kind of tactics did they use?
Everything. The FBI investigated its funding, looking for communist links, of course. The American Legion organized a nationwide boycott. Film labs were pressured, told not to process the film stock.
Wow. Industrial sabotage.
Totally. Projectionists were warned not to show it. There were even reports of anti-communist vigilantes firing rifles at the set during filming.
Firing rifles?
Yeah. And the film's star, the lead actress, Rosaura Vueltas, she was actually deported back to Mexico mid-production.
That's incredible. It sounds like a coordinated attack to just erase the film.
It basically was a domestic operation against a movie simply because it championed workers' rights. Its potential impact was completely neutralized.
Okay, so we've seen direct government pressure from the DoD, CIA, FBI, but the controls on Hollywood don't stop there, do they? There's the whole corporate structure, the big studios themselves.
Right. That's the next layer, the sort of invisible filter. Most of the entertainment industry is owned by just a handful of massive media conglomerates, the Big Six, back then. Slightly different now, but still consolidated. Universal, Warner, Disney, Fox, Paramount, Sony.
And that concentration of ownership matters.
Hugely, because it means narratives tend to play it safe.
Yeah.
You avoid controversy, you avoid offending powerful interests, including the corporate parent company, major advertisers, political allies. It creates an ideological boundary.
And sometimes the corporate bosses step in directly, overriding their own studio people, like Rupert Murdoch.
Murdoch's a perfect example. Remember David Fincher's Fight Club?
Yeah, 1999, very controversial, anti-consumerist, critiques of masculinity.
Exactly. Well, Rupert Murdoch, who owned Fox, the studio that made it, apparently hated it. He reportedly said something like, you have to be sick to make a movie like that.
His personal opinion.
His personal ideological dislike of its dark tone and anti-capitalist vibe. And shortly after, the studio head who greenlit it, Bill Mechanic, resigned unexpectedly. The message was clear. The big boss's ideology matters more than the studio exec's judgment.
That's direct top-down filtering.
And then think about Warren Beatty's film, Bulworth, 1998. A political satire where his character, a senator, starts speaking uncomfortable truths, even mentions socialism.
Which is taboo in mainstream U.S. politics.
Right. So Fox, which also owned that studio, released Bulworth on the same weekend as the huge blockbuster Godzilla, basically burying it.
Guaranteed failure.
Deliberate sabotage, many suspected, to minimize the reach of its politically edgy message.
And Disney got caught up in this kind of corporate filtering, too, with Michael Moore.
Yeah, with Fahrenheit 9/11, Moore's documentary critical of the Bush administration after 9/11. Disney owned Miramax, the film's distributor at the time.
And they blocked it.
Disney refused to let Miramax distribute it. Why? Fear of political backlash, potentially hurting Disney's other business interests, maybe relationships with the Saudi royal family who were mentioned in the film. They didn't want the heat.
But the film got released eventually, right?
It did, through another distributor. But then the censorship continued. CBS, NBC, ABC, the major TV networks all refused to run advertisements for the DVD release during their news shows.
So it wasn't just one company, it was the wider media landscape acting as a filter.
Exactly. A kind of systemic limiting of a specific political viewpoint's reach.
Okay, so we have government agencies, corporate ownership. What about foreign governments influencing Hollywood? That seems like a newer but growing factor.
Definitely growing, especially with the importance of the global box office. China is the obvious powerhouse here.
Because the Chinese market is so huge.
And it's massive. So access to that market gives Beijing enormous leverage. Films that might criticize China or touch on sensitive topics like Tibet or Taiwan, they're becoming almost impossible to get made by major studios.
Like the Doctor Strange example.
Perfect example. In the Marvel comics, the character, the Ancient One, is a Tibetan man.
Yeah.
In the 2016 movie, they cast Tilda Swinton, a white Celtic woman.
Why the change?
Explicitly to avoid the political sensitivity of Tibet and ensure the film wouldn't be banned in China. It's a clear case of preemptive self-censorship to protect market access.
And if studios don't self-censor, China pushes back hard. Like with the Red Dawn remake.
That story is wild. They remade the 80s movie Red Dawn in 2012. The original script had China invading the U.S.
Okay.
That script leaked. The Chinese government complained loudly. So what did the producers do? They spent $1 million in post-production.
$1 million? To do what?
To digitally change the invaders. They altered flags, uniforms, dialogue, everything to make the invading army North Korean instead of Chinese.
Just swapped out the enemy digitally to appease China.
Yep. Spent 7 figures to erase one country and insert another, less economically important one, purely because of political pressure from Beijing. That shows you where the power lies.
And this isn't always reactive, right? Sometimes governments proactively pay Hollywood to shape their image, like national product placement.
Yeah, Mexico and the James Bond film Spectre is the prime case study for that.
What happened with Spectre?
The Mexican government apparently struck a deal, offering the producers something like $20 million in extra incentives beyond normal tax breaks.
$20 million for what?
For specific script changes to the opening sequence, which was set in Mexico City during the Day of the Dead.
What kind of changes did they demand?
The leaked emails showed they wanted specific things. The main villain couldn't be Mexican. The first Bond girl had to be a famous Mexican actress. A corrupt local governor character had to be changed to an international ambassador. And the film had to positively showcase modern Mexico City architecture and, crucially, Mexico's elite special police force.
And the film delivered on all that.
Every single point. It became a kind of high-stakes tourism commercial, paid for by the Mexican government, written right into the Bond script. Direct financial transaction for specific narrative outcomes.
Okay, so you put all this together, government pressure, corporate filters, foreign money. It really does stack the deck against films that are genuinely critical, doesn't it?
It makes it incredibly difficult. The path of least resistance is always towards conformity.
But some filmmakers still try. They push back, or maybe they find ways to compromise, like Charlie Wilson's War. That seemed like a liberal film, criticizing past policy.
It seemed like it, and it was based on a really good critical book by George Quayle about the U.S. arming the Afghan Mujahideen against the Soviets.
Right.
But the final film, while looking liberal on the surface, did something crucial. It systematically erased the most damning historical context.
Which was?
The fact that the U.S. started secretly arming the Mujahideen before the Soviets invaded. The whole Afghan trap strategy.
Why is omitting that so important? What's the Afghan trap?
The Afghan trap was the idea, pushed by people like National Security Advisor Brzezinski, to deliberately lure the Soviet Union into their own Vietnam-style quagmire in Afghanistan. By funding the anti-Soviet fighters first, they hoped to provoke a Soviet invasion.
Okay.
By cutting that pre-invasion aid out of the story, the film makes it seem like the U.S. only reacted after the Soviets invaded. It removes any sense that U.S. policy might have caused or escalated the conflict.
And crucially, it breaks the link to later events.
Exactly. It severs the potential causal chain between that CIA operation in the 80s and the rise of the very groups trained and armed by the U.S. that later became al-Qaeda and led to 9/11.
Was that link actually in the original script?
Apparently, yes. The original script reportedly had a final scene where Charlie Wilson hears about the Pentagon being hit on 9/11, making that connection explicit.
But it was cut.
Cut. So the final film avoids suggesting U.S. policy backfired catastrophically. And guess what? The CIA's own Hollywood liaison praised the film as positive portrayal of CIA accomplishment. The compromise worked from their perspective.
Then you have filmmakers like Oliver Stone who seem to actively fight the system their whole career.
Stone is kind of the textbook example of how hard it is. His film JFK was so explosive, it literally led to Congress passing the Oliver Stone Act to release assassination files.
Huge impact.
Huge. But despite that success, Stone has constantly struggled to get funding for his political films within the U.S. studio system. Films about Martin Luther King's assassination, even films about sitting presidents.
He had to go outside the U.S. for money. Even for Snowden.
Yeah, for Snowden in 2016, he talked about how strange it was to make a film about an American whistleblower and not be able to get it financed in America.
What did he say about why?
He said, and this really sums it up, thought is financed and thought is controlled. There's no criticism allowed at a certain level. Dissent might be tolerated on the fringes, but getting major funding for truly challenging ideas, very, very difficult.
But it's not completely impossible. Sometimes subversive stuff does get made, even with big budgets, often in sci-fi. Paul Verhoeven comes to mind.
Verhoeven is the master of the subversive blockbuster, a rare bird. RoboCop, Total Recall, Starship Troopers, that's his trifecta.
RoboCop was pretty blatant, wasn't it? About privatization leading to fascism.
Oh, yeah. The evil corporation, OCP, the executive literally says, "We practically are the military." Verhoeven himself called it very close to fascism. It's a brutal critique wrapped in sci-fi action.
How did that get past the studio bosses?
Well, they definitely tried to tone down the violence. The MPAA hit it with an X rating initially, forced some cuts. But Verhoeven fought to keep certain scenes, like the famous melting man, apparently because test audiences loved it so much. It was, as the producer called it, fascism for liberals.
And then Starship Troopers, that one seemed even riskier, glorifying militarism but also satirizing it as fascist propaganda. How did that get a $100 million budget?
That's a great story, actually. According to Verhoeven, it basically slipped through the cracks because Sony Pictures, the studio, was in total chaos at the time.
Management turmoil.
Complete turmoil. He said the studio leadership was changing every few months, so nobody saw the rushes. No one was really paying attention to what he was making.
So by the time they saw the finished film,
this incredibly violent, politically incorrect satire of fascism, they were apparently stunned, flabbergasted. But it was too late to change it significantly. Corporate dysfunction accidentally created space for radical critique. So if you weave all these threads together, the DoD's hardware leverage, the CIA's narrative shaping, the FBI's history of domestic suppression, the corporate filters, the foreign government influence, you get a picture of a really comprehensive system.
A system designed to manage how we see the world, particularly national security.
Pretty much. It shapes our perception of American power, American actions, both overseas and at home. You know, Hollywood gets called a broad church, and sure, dissent can exist, but the research suggests that dissent is usually pretty weak, tepid, easily ignored.
And sometimes punished.
The power structure within that church is clear.
Who's at the top?
The researchers put it starkly. The bishops are the heads of the media monopolies, and they're slanked by their national security clergymen, the liaisons from the DoD, CIA, FBI. Together, they tend to uphold an ideology that favors U.S. power, justifies interventions, and frames American actions as fundamentally heroic.
And this idea of using entertainment for propaganda, it's not new. It has deep roots going back to wartime.
Yeah, there's that chilling quote from Elmer Davis, who ran the Office of War Information back in 1942 during World War II.
What did he say?
He said, "The easiest way to inject a propaganda idea into most people's minds is to let it go through the medium of an entertainment picture when they do not realize that they are being propagandized."
Wow. Don't realize you're being propagandized. So what does this mean for you, the listener, today? Back in World War II, maybe that government Hollywood link felt necessary, fighting Nazism.
Right, an existential threat.
But the authors we've been discussing, Alford and Saker, they draw a much more disturbing conclusion about the present.
They do. They warn, basically, that those same propaganda engines are back in action, bigger, better, and at full throttle. But the difference is...
What's the difference?
This time, no one knows it. This time, there is no Nazi threat. This time, the engines are turned on us, turned inward, on the domestic population.
So the final question, the one for you to think about, is this. What does it mean for democracy when that government propaganda engine built during wartime just keeps running at full speed, aimed at its own citizens, even when there isn't a clear existential enemy like the Nazis?
Yeah, when the very idea of the threat, whether it's terrorism or a rival nation or even internal dissent, is itself being scripted, funded, and sold to us as entertainment.
Who's really writing the story of our freedom and our security then? That's something to chew on next time you're deciding what movie to watch.